In studio today, what a special treat this is. Trevor Matich is here. Trevor, we're so glad we're here to talk about the Redskins because I got like a billion questions, and you're the guy to help me understand it better. So Kirk Cousins yesterday, I thought he looked really sharp. Now, there were those 2 interceptions. I grant you that. But his reads were good. He had command of that football field. He had command of that team. And that last 2-minute drill was an inspired thing.
Yeah, overall, Cousins was fantastic. Now, granted, the Falcons' defense is horrible. But what Cousins did was what has not been happening with RG3 in recent weeks, and that is he was making the right read, throwing it to the right spot at the right time to the right guy. He was also moving in the pocket very well to avoid sacks.
Yeah.
There's a pocket presence that he's got because in college he ran a drop-back pocket style offense, and that means that when there's defenders coming around behind him in pass rush, you move up in the pocket. When there's guys coming from the side, you move to the side. There's small movements you do to create space that he does naturally that RG3 still has to be taught to do. And all those things combine to an efficiently operating offense.
Do we have too high opinion of RG3 and too low of opinion of Kirk Cousins?
No, I think the opinion of Kirk Cousins is about right. Right now, the book on Cousins is will look really sharp, will function with great efficiency, and will occasionally throw it to the other team. So he's got to fix that. He did it with 2 interceptions in this game, and they were both the right place to throw, but an inaccurate throw. RG3, I think, in fairness to him, while he has been the arbiter of his own problems, he's created a lot of his own problems. At the same time, he's not been put in a position this year to be able to succeed as well as that you would have liked, because he needs to be coached how to be an NFL drop-back quarterback, and I don't think he's gotten that quality of coaching that he needs to succeed there yet.
Who are you referring to?
Well, Kyle Shanahan's the offensive coordinator. And the thing about Kyle is that they're already talking about now his departure from the team as being his decision, that he wants to separate from his father and strike out on his own and things like that. And the interesting thing about that from a communication standpoint is that it seems to be a precursor to him departing and striking out on his own.
Yeah.
But having it be his idea and not being fired. And the thing is Kyle knows football. He calls good games a lot. I mean, you look at his game plans, they're often very, very good, and his play calling is often very, very good. But the relationship with the quarterback is critical. And by all accounts, my birdies tell me that his relationship with RG3 is not what it needs to be in order for there to be the kind of relationship that would allow RG3 to flourish, allow RG3 to be able to get the quality of coaching that he needs. And so I think from that standpoint, Kyle Shanahan, it might be better for him and RG3 if he were to go to a different team.
Well, and let's face it, his relationship with Coach Shanahan is not that great either. I mean, is just getting rid of Kyle going to be the answer, or does the senior Shanahan need to take a hike as well?
Well, I don't getting rid of Kyle. See, you have to figure out who to blame, and I'm not saying that Kyle is the problem here. I'm saying these 2 guys are oil and water; they're not mixing.
Right.
And when that happens, the quarterback stays. And you've got to bring in a new coach. And the chemistry is every bit as important as the capability.
But isn't there a chemistry problem with Mike Shanahan as well?
Yes, but a lot of that
they've been bickering in the press. They've been bickering behind the scenes.
Yes, and Mike Shanahan has culpability in that. So does RG3. But ultimately, I think if the offensive coordinator is not the son of the head coach, you've got more of a normal man-to-man relationship between all 3 of them. And in fairness to RG3, he has not experienced that here.
Before we create a quarterback controversy, which my dear friend Brian Wilson has been trying to drum up for about 2 months now. Kirk Cousins, yes, he had a fine game yesterday. They lost, by the way, in part because of his 2 interceptions. In part because of his 2 interceptions, but also, do we have any doubt that a healthy RG3 wouldn't have just shredded that Atlanta defense yesterday? He would have had a great game as well.
He would have, and he would have done it in a completely different way.
Right.
In other words, he would have moved around back there. He'd have dropped back in the pocket. He'd have looked around, and 8 seconds later, after making pass rushers miss, he would have spotted somebody and whipped the ball down the field to him. That's not how this offense functions from the pocket. That's how it functions when you roll out. But from the pocket, this is a West Coast style offense. That means quarterback needs to have a good pre-snap read of the defense. He needs to drop back knowing where he's going to throw that ball, get the ball out of his hand quickly to a receiver, probably running a short horizontal route, And you get your big plays mostly from the receiver breaking one tackle and running after the catch. Occasionally, you throw it vertically. But that requires the quarterback to make the right read, hit the right guy with accuracy over and over and over again.
Trevor, there are 2 games left here, and if Kirk Cousins shows himself to be a competent quarterback, which we agree he is, he comes from the Big Ten, so clearly he's a good quarterback. Is there any chance that by starting him in
there's a homer.
By starting
Who's played in the national championship game, by the way?
By starting him in these 2 games, isn't this really creating a horrible offseason for both Coach Mike Shanahan and RG3? I mean, this is a recipe for disaster here.
It's only a recipe for disaster if egos are so fragile that competition is not allowed.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. The competition won't be there. I mean, theoretically, it should be. The price has been paid. You've purchased both quarterbacks with draft choices and trades and money and everything else. Now they're here. They're in the cupboard.
Right.
Now what do? Well, you play the best one, right? Well, it doesn't work that way in the NFL.
Not at all. And, Trevor, you talk about the fact that
because you're not making a decision based on merit. You're making a decision in often case about politics.
No,
and ego.
it's both. It's both.
And investment. You're skewing to one side because of investment. But the thing is, RG3 still has the greater upside, in my opinion.
Really.
And Trevor Matich, you say investment. That's not. We're not talking about a monetary investment. You're talking about the fact that they traded those draft choices. Well, if you're showcasing Kirk Cousins here for the last few weeks of the year, isn't it possible that he then becomes the prime trade option for the Redskins? Because there's a lot of teams who would love to have a Kirk Cousins as their starting quarterback, and maybe they've got some draft picks or some personnel that they would be willing to give up so that Kirk Cousins would no longer have to be the number 2 here in Washington. He could be the number 1 elsewhere.
There are 32 teams in the NFL. There are not 32 starting caliber quarterbacks in the NFL. And if a team thinks that Kirk Cousins might be that guy, you've got a guy that's got 2 years of experience now in the league, instead of bringing in a raw draft choice and trying to get him up to speed quickly. So his trade value keeps going up for that reason alone. But if you're the Redskins, you've got a starting quarterback in RG3, and he is the starter that has not proven he can stay healthy. You need 2 quarterbacks that can play, and if you believe Cousins can play, you keep him. Now keep in mind this, that over the last 2 years, the Redskins have been penalized $36 million of salary cap space because of shenanigans they played in the front office. And that kept them from replacing those draft choices that they traded for RG3 with free agents. They expected to have that. Now imagine this team with an extra $36 million worth of free agents on it. Yeah. Well, that salary cap space is now back to normal starting with this offseason. And so they'll be able to start to fill out the roster once again. So you could trade Kirk Cousins to get another draft choice. But at the same time, if you think you have a guy that can develop into a solid backup and even a solid starter, you want to keep him on your team if you can.
You know, this is our last chance to have Trevor Matich in studio here at the end of the Redskins season here because the holidays are coming. Right. Can you stick around just for a few more minutes?
Because we didn't even get into the game decision at the end of the game to go for 2 points. We got to talk about that.
All right, plenty more to talk about with the Redskins here with Trevor Matich. Stay with us.
We're pleased to have Trevor Matich in house today. We're talking about the Redskins and the controversy and Kirk Cousins and all that. We haven't gotten into that decision made at the end of the game to go for 2 and win the game rather than go into overtime and try to win the game that way. Was that a good call? Because a lot of people thought that was a pretty controversial call.
It was a defensible call because they had just ripped off an 80-yard drive at the end of the game, and everything was working. Everything was working, and they were getting the coverages that they expected based on down and distance and formation. They thought they would get the coverage that they expected as well on that 2-point conversion. Well, give the Falcons credit. But because of the flow of the game at the time, you can defend it. I thought they should have gone to overtime because even though the Redskins gave up 7 turnovers, they were an extra point away from tying that game there at the end, and I thought the Redskins had all the momentum going into overtime should they choose to go there.
Yeah, so did I.
But you can defend that decision, and I don't think Shanahan should take any negative criticism because of it.
Let me just be conspiratorial here for just a moment. What if the Redskins had won that game? You know what the narrative would be. Kirk Cousins wins, and Robert Griffin III doesn't.
Yeah, but
and by losing this game, they don't have to put up with that, and they don't have to embarrass their quarterback of the future.
Yeah, but the thing is, if that were the narrative, then the people espousing that narrative should shake their heads so their eyeballs get unstuck. It's
like me.
Yeah. Because the thing is, Cousins played exceptionally well, but the conspiracy here is not whether or not winning 3 games at the end of the season against 3 horrendous defenses would then put Cousins in position to take over for RG3. I mean, if there is an open competition, which I doubt will happen, then that'll come in the offseason and then in training camp.
All right, so benching RG3 was sort of couched in this, he needs time to recover and get is there any word?
I don't buy that for a minute.
You don't?
Yeah, I think he was benched in part because of performance. He just wasn't executing the offense.
Well, exactly. This is my point. It's like with RG3, and look, I have a lot of respect for the young man. I'm not anti-RG3, but he wasn't performing. And at some point, don't we, as fans, get to say, you know what, the Emperor doesn't have any clothes?
Well, no, you're right. But see, I would phrase it just slightly differently, and this might be a distinction without a difference, or however you might say that. It's not that he wasn't performing, it's that he wasn't executing. He was getting yards. The Redskins' offense was putting up a lot of yards, but they weren't putting up as many points as they should per yard gained. And part of the reason was the execution wasn't there. That means you'd have a nice play, but then you'd have a missed opportunity at 2nd and 10. Another missed opportunity, sack, and now it's 3rd and 16. And this is what kept on keeping the Redskins off the board. And it's that predictability and efficiency that this offense requires, and RG3 just wasn't performing that way.
Right, but is the problem the player or is the problem the system? Because you know very well in the NFL these days it's a coach's system that makes such a big difference. And if you don't have the right personnel to execute that system, then it's going to be a disaster.
Last year, RG3 lit up the NFL with that college-style hybrid where he moved around. This year, because of his knee and because of the fact that he wanted to change the way he was being used, he insisted, his family insisted, his people insisted that he be morphed into a drop-back quarterback. And the team tried to give him his way as much as they possibly could. Some games they'd come in with the script that he was Peyton Manning. He was in the pocket the whole time, getting overwhelmed and crushed back there, but he was there. Then the next game, they start moving the pocket. They'd move the ball. Things would go great. He'd get hit a few times. They put him back in the pocket. And so ultimately it comes down to he will need to be more in the pocket because he will insist on being in the pocket. He needs to be coached things that he has never learned before in order to succeed in the pocket. And he doesn't have the relationship with Kyle Shanahan, I think, that can make that coaching succeed. And I don't know that Kyle Shanahan and the staff that he has here has the experience to get him from where he is, which is 0 in the pocket.
So what's the solution?
To NFL level in the pocket.
Do they have to bring in his old coach at Baylor and have him come in as the new offensive
you wouldn't
coordinator?
teach him how to be in the pocket either. But I think right now it's very toxic down there between Kyle and Robert. And I think ultimately it's better for both men if Kyle strikes out on his own, and Kyle Shanahan now, the coach's son, the offensive coordinator.
Will he go back to Houston?
It's possible. He could go back. He's got a relationship there. The owner knows him. And by the way, he did well when he was there. He's done well here. But again, remember, chemistry is important, and that's another thing when you look at the success of Kirk Cousins in this game. It's not just that he's a superior athlete. He's not. RG3 is a superior athlete. But his skills had better chemistry with the rest of the team running a drop-back scheme than RG3 does running a drop-back scheme. And chemistry in the NFL is everything.
Well, 2 more games left in the season, and that means 2 more times that we get to visit with Trevor Matich. Actually, 4 more times we get to visit with Trevor Matich.
Before and after, that's right.
So this Friday, we'll talk to you about our upcoming game, yeah?
Stay tuned for the next episode of Keeping Up with the Shandashians.
Shandashians, I love it.
This is how Snyder's going to make his money.
That's right.
It's a reality show.
All
right.
Who gets to play Bruce Jenner?
Hey, that's Shanahan. Have you seen the little? He's got a little.